Rayman 2 is easily another high point in the classic Rayman series, and I think that just like Rayman 1 has this very specific identity that would be incredibly hard to recreate today, the same is true for Rayman 2 with its super colorful world and that kind of subtle, charming humor that has aged really well over time. I should mention that I haven't really played Rayman 3 myself, but a lot of people say it's a great game in its own right, and I'm not about to argue with that. So in this video, for a change, I'm not going to compare every single version of Rayman 2, because there are something like 8 of them, and each one is slightly different. What I do want to check instead is how easy it is to actually play the PC version you can buy on GOG, as part of what they call the Preservation Program. For anyone who's not familiar, this program is basically about keeping older games playable in the future, even without official developer support, and of course without DRM. There is a small caveat here though, since most of these releases still rely on Windows, or on emulation within a Windows environment. It's a pretty interesting topic on its own, but I'm not going to go too deep into it here, at least not in this video. So going back to Rayman 2, luckily the PC version is actually excellent, and since I wanted to get the vanilla experience, I started by running the game as is, and only after that looking into what could be improved, if anything at all. So the first thing I did was turn the music volume down, because the sound mix in most versions is not great. By the way, even though the GOG changelog mentions a Polish translation, it's not actually here, but it's easy enough to find online. I'm not completely sure what resolution the game is running at, but I'm guessing it follows the current Windows resolution in a 4:3 format, which is still much higher than the original maximum of 1024 by 768. Now, since this version was released around the same time as the original Nintendo 64 version, it shares some of its limitations, like the fact that there's no narration at all. On the other hand, the Raymanian language actually adds to the light, playful atmosphere in my opinion, especially compared to the English voice acting that was added in the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 versions. I also wouldn't call it gibberish in the usual sense, because it sounds noticeably different depending on who's speaking at any given moment.
Hey! GLaDOS! They'll never fall shit. You wanted me more this too? No, what's better? Now it's too. Come on, Bruce, too. I won't change it up.
Now, when I said the PC version is excellent, I was talking about things like the smart use of the limited hardware acceleration from back then. I'm pretty sure I even played it on my Voodoo 2 at the time. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought this was a remaster, even though here and there you can still spot textures that clearly wouldn't meet the standards of companies like Night Dive Studios. Now, when it comes to controls, I originally played the game on a weird gamepad called the Rage 3D. Yeah, not the best choice considering ATI, now AMD, had a graphics card with almost the same name. But it's not as bad as it looks. Sure, it's a bit too big, but the option to switch between digital and analog control on the same stick is actually really useful. Either way, GOG patched the game so it natively supports modern controllers. Jump and attack are mapped to the face buttons A and X. The right trigger and left trigger control the camera, although in that old school limited way. The camera just rotates clockwise or counterclockwise around Rayman and doesn't change the viewing angle from his perspective. The right button recenters the camera behind Rayman, and the left button shows how many lums you've collected and how many cages you've freed in the current level. The problem is with F1 on the keyboard, which brings up a tips window and just doesn't seem to work on the gamepad no matter what I tried. But even worse, the 0 key on the numpad switches Rayman into a first-person view, not a full first-person mode, and that option is also completely missing on the gamepad. Either way, I don't really remember if there are specific moments in the game where you actually have to use the first-person view, but I'd guess that if you're trying to collect all the lums, it could definitely limit you. So like I hinted at the beginning of the video, one of the things I wanted to check was what else could be improved visually. It turns out you not only get access to the original game config, but also to the wrapper that provides backward compatibility for glide modes from 3DFX, or older versions of DirectX, with glide set as the default. I'm not showing this here, but the moment I started tweaking some of the settings, the game just froze on the title screen. This actually happened to quite a few players on the GOG forums who updated to the latest version without doing a clean install. The solution I found was to delete the entire game folder and then run a verify. The only issue is that I'm not sure whether you can still recover your old cloud saves this way. I gave it one more shot and downloaded the latest community patch called Ray 2 Fix, which thankfully doesn't touch the original EXE, so you don't run into any copy protection errors. I'm happy to report that it works really well. It enables proper widescreen support and lets you fully map all the controls to a gamepad. My guess is that GOG didn't want to rely on an external patch that could change over time, and also includes its own credits in the menu. Either way, as you can probably tell, their loss and yours. So in a way, it does feel like going back to square one, but at the same time, GOG are probably right. This is still the most accessible version out there. Hope you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing if you want to see more retro deep dives.